So, hello and welcome. Thank you for registering for our webinar panel discussion hosted by market leader in FDD analytics software, CIM. Your chair for the next 60 minutes. My name is Jim McClelland, founder and editor of SUSMeme, the magazine and weekly bulletin. The focus of this latest webinar in our real estate program, how fault detection and diagnostics, FDD, improves performance outcomes in commercial buildings. To take us through the topic, we have a wealth of built environment experience and a breadth of perspectives on our panel today. By way of introductions, please join me in welcoming Ryan Droege, Director of Digital Buildings at Cushman Wakefield, Daniel Stanley, Managing Director for UK BMS Consultancy, and Paul Walsh, Chief Operating Officer at our host CIM. Our format for today: Paul will kick us off with a brief topic intro, some slides, then exploring insights and issues. Our panel are going to delve into the benefits of utilizing FDD, lessons to be learned from some real world examples, always useful, key considerations when implementing, some of the challenges and issues maybe, and then a final look ahead, takeaways, audience Q&A to close. So that's audience, then, if you do have questions on that note, you should find a Q&A button in the bottom of your window. Pop them in there, type them in throughout the session if you would, and we'll try to get them during both the debate and the final Q&A, plus pick up the odd one offline after the event. It is all live, as you will see, and recorded. So once the webinar concludes, kindly take a moment. There'll be a very short feedback survey. Keep an eye out for that, please, as well as the link for the recording arriving in your email inbox. Right, that's enough from me. Let the show begin. To kick us off then, Paul, a scene setter, some opening insights, conversation starters, and explainer intro onto how fault detection and diagnostics, FDD, improves performance outcomes in commercial buildings. Paul, over to you, please.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks everybody for joining us here today. I assume you guys can see my screen now?
Indeed.
Okay, all right. So just to start, I suppose, with the numbers, a lot of people are joining the call because they realize that FDD is now becoming very front of mind for a lot of people. And in terms of some market research that we did, the market is going to grow exponentially. It's estimated that it'll get over $15 billion, by 2030. And it's growing at a compounded annual growth rate of 15%. So everybody wants to figure out how to get into this space and how to get in most cost effectively and as quickly as possible. And on average, buildings that do FDD correctly, there is a significant benefit for doing that, and 30% energy reduction in some instances. How a typical FDD platform works is there is normally a data acquisition device installed on a building. The building has to have a building management system, a BMS or BAS as they call it in the US. And the acquisition device is BAS agnostic, so it doesn't matter if it's a Siemens, Schneider, Honeywell, any of the OEMs. A good FDD platform will be able to communicate directly with the controller. So it's just essentially gathering the data, all the analog inputs and outputs, all the digital inputs and outputs, and the set points that are flowing on that system in real time. And then it sends it out to a cloud-based platform. And that's where the rules engine essentially run across that data set. And we have a sales engineer that continually calls it a digital sieve. It's like having millions of data points and pouring them through a digital sieve, and the sieve is detecting anomalies in real time. Most FDD platforms, good FDD platforms, can bring in non-BAS data as well, such as if there's energy metering on a site, an FDD platform should bring them in, as well as a feed directly from your main utility provider for gas, electricity, and water. And what that does for building the FDD reputation, if you like, or trust in the FDD model, is it shows the client how FDD is making a difference to the quantum of energy they're using over time. So it's demand-side energy reduction. So FDD should always be deployed as the first cab off the rank in terms of a CO2 reduction journey. So you basically eliminate the waste in the building, and then you keep the building operating efficiently over the course of its life. We use an AI tool. Like AI is another buzzword that is quite topical at the minute. And what we have used AI for is to help us rapidly onboard new buildings. And essentially, some people on the call will be aware that the naming convention of points on a building varies. It varies by region, it varies by company, it often varies by technician that works for companies. There is obviously an effort to try and standardize that naming convention, but a lot of times it's all over the place. So what the AI tool does is it looks for commonalities across that data set, and then it starts to figure out how to normalize that data, how to cleanse it, how to get it into 15-minute intervals, so that we get a kind of a structured format like that the software can run across very, very quickly. And that normally takes, well, it used to take a lot of human effort to get that done. And using AI scripts to that allows it to be done very, very quickly, a matter of days for thousands of data points. The other thing we use AI for is to help deploy the rules. So when you have a series of points that are named by equipment type, so you might have a lot of points that are by AHU, by fan coil unit, by chiller, the AI script will also then deploy the associated rules for air handling units, or for chillers, or for fan coil units, or whatever particular piece of equipment you're looking at. And again, that speeds up the speed to value. So typically from the time that you install a data acquisition device, which is a small, actually I have one here, I'll show the audience. It's a small, essentially a little Intel NUC PC, measures about 100 millimeters square by about 30 millimeters wide. So it fits in a BAS cabinet. From the time you install that to the time that you have the site fully commissioned is typically less than 30 days. And the issue resolution piece, this is bridging the gap between what the software identifies and what the on-site team can resolve. And we're conscious of that being a huge chasm. So what FDD should do is it should make it super easy. Like, the people who run buildings are already very, very busy. The last thing they want is more work to do in their business day. So making it super easy for them to understand what is going wrong, to eliminate the time to diagnosis, to tell them exactly that there's a temperature sensor faulty in the reception. And if they go fix that, it fixes all the subsequent issues upstream with the energy inefficiency. So that automated alert notification and also the digital workflow is super intuitive. And I suppose we're conscious that the people who operate buildings are not sitting at their desk looking at a platform. So this needs to be mobile friendly. So this is how it looks on a mobile device. They can action items, they can comment on items, they can take photographs, they can reassign. So again, it has to be very easy for them to do, and that works very well. The type of issues that a good FDD platform finds are all the low and no cost fixes. So it's stuff that's already included in your O&M budget. So your property management team should already have budget for things like passing heating valve replacement, to fix a faulty damper, to take a VSD or a VFD out of hand, to replace temperature sensors, as I mentioned. So it's all those low and no cost opportunities, and there's some examples of them here. And then rolling it back up. So if you think of the executive persona that's managing a portfolio, he or she always needs to be able to have that 30,000-foot view where they can see how well their assets are running individually, but also at a portfolio level, how they might be aligning towards a CO2 reduction goal that the organization has, what sites are doing a really good job in terms of delivering against that goal, what sites are not. So you can have a kind of a leaderboard element going on. And also you're having that element of gamification. So you're able to give shout outs to companies or to building owners or to property management teams that are doing a really good job. And that drives a behavioral change with the people that are not, kind of subconsciously, but it does definitely work. And that, as I said, that portfolio view is quite useful for that executive persona. And just, I suppose, maybe some of the pushback we've got over the years is, oh, I have a BMS. This does it for me already, in terms of FDD or does analytics itself. I suppose the couple of points we make about this is primarily, like, if you have an FDD platform that is offered by your incumbent BMS provider, there is a lack of a degree of independence there. Like, it's like someone correcting their own homework. So by partnering with an independent company, you can actually shine a light on the BMS and confirm that it's operating correctly, or else if it's not, here is what needs to be done to improve it. The other thing a good FDD platform does is it prevent any BMS is alarming hundreds of times per day. And what ends up happening is the technicians on site just get overwhelmed and they just ignore it because you can't possibly decipher what's valuable, what's not. So a good FDD platform will do a multivariate analysis to make sure what it is triggering is high impact in terms of energy reduction, thermal compliance, safety is another big one, equipment reliability. Like if you have a fan that's running 24/7, that fan's lifetime is going to be shortened. So if you can fix that, you get longer out of that fan and you defer CapEx. The workflow piece is key as well, because you need to be able to empower people who are, like if you think about a typical persona that's operating a building, he or she is probably an electrician or a fitter or like a mechanical trades person. They may not know, and again, this is a bit of a generalization, so please forgive me, but they may not know they may not have a detailed understanding of how a BMS control strategy should work or how HVAC plant and equipment works. But by being able to use software to identify and to prescribe exactly what they need to do, it empowers them to take control of how their building operates. And that's a very, culturally, that's a huge benefit to them, because they want to be perceived to be doing a really good job for their management team. And the last one then is, again, because the technology is agnostic, it's very difficult it's not very difficult, but it's quite expensive for a current BMS vendor to provide insights across multiple of its competitors. But whereas an independent company like CIM has the ability to provide access to multiple vendor types across portfolios and across different geographies. And that's it. So I'll stop talking there, Jim, and I'll pass it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And yeah, nice show and tell. You had one you made earlier there. So good start with the numbers, sort of 30% energy reduction potentially. Nice run through of the journey, data acquisition, digital sieve, as your colleague calls it, use of AI, normalized cleanse. And nice points about the fact it needs to be super intuitive, mobile friendly, make it easy to save time, save energy, save money. And I thought a nice point also about the visibility at all levels, from the big overview, a helicopter view, if you like, right down to the close-up. So some nice points, and it's a busy start for you here, Paul, because in terms of the first question, we're going to look at benefits. I'm going to come to you first because I'd like to ask you about the owners specifically before I invite the other panels. So Paul, CIM work with large property portfolio owners, number of years. So based on those engagements, what benefit do they most value about FDD and analytics software? What is it that they like, Paul?
It's a good question, and I have been doing a bit of reflection on this, Jim. I suppose what a common thread through we've deployed the technology on about 500 buildings globally, and what, as I said, a commonality tends to be is that FDD provides a good first step for any building owner to take on a carbon reduction journey, because it's essentially low risk from a financial perspective. They don't have to spend any capital to implement it. It's easy to, you don't have to install metering. So it's a very good way of starting to get some wins on the board on your sustainability journey and start getting kind of internally within your own organization. What these people have used it for is to get a coalition of the willing and start changing hearts and minds around how aggressive the CO2 reduction journey is going to be. And how immediate normally people have a 2030 or 2035 deadline. That's not that far away considering the size of some of these portfolios. So it's getting started on that journey. It has been an immensely beneficial way for them to get some wins on the board. And also what some companies have been able to do is ring fence the savings from FDD to fund additional CapEx, additional upgrades. So they don't need to go back to the business asking for CapEx. They do it out of OpEx savings. And again, that's been fantastic. The other thing it's done, I suppose, is it's helped, like everybody on the call here will be familiar with the famous term, the low-hanging fruit. And it really irritates me, that term. But I suppose what's happening, according as people are up in their game, is that, buildings are changing their lights, they're improving the air tightness of the building, and they're all kind of ticking the box around stuff they can do from a low-hanging fruit perspective. Now, we would still believe that there is still a lot of low-hanging fruit out there around HVAC optimization. So being able to continue to address that famous low-hanging fruit analogy by using FDD again is another benefit for that type of a client. And the last one, I suppose, is like what we've seen is by implementing FDD on the buildings, the people that are occupying the building, whether they're direct employees of the owner or whether they're tenants, they tend to have a more positive experience of being in that building from a thermal comfort perspective, because there's nothing as annoying as being in a building when it's too hot or too cold. It's distracting you from your work. You can't, concentrate. Your productivity is through the floor. So being able to deploy FDD eliminates all those hot and cold complaints, and it allows for happier tenants that are probably going to renew their tenancy, and also it makes them super productive. So hopefully that ticked a few boxes.
Very much nice points there. So, and nice point about often the decarbonisation journey. You have to de-risk the process. It allows some of the champions to sell it internally, get some buy-in, as you suggested, and get those early wins. Then you've got momentum. Once you're on the ladder, you can climb it. But the danger is they don't actually step onto the ladder. And a good point at the end about the UX, the user experience. Buildings are for people to be in, typically, or certainly the kind of commercial buildings we're talking about, most of them. So the user experience is crucial. So now that's the owner's perspective, if you like. So now if we're thinking more about partners, I'd now like to bring in Daniel. So in your view, for firms, there might be BMS and engineering consultancies or ESG advisors who work on behalf of property owners to improve building performance. What are the most compelling benefits of incorporating FDD into their service offering? Effectively, what's in it for them, Daniel?
A lot of things Paul's already sort of picked up on there, but I think for any building and anyone running a building, I think the quicker you can pick up issues within a building, the better. It's better for the tenants, the clients, or whatever's going on in the building. So I think by putting in an FDD system, you're going to pick up deviations from normal service far quicker, rather than letting things run, which again has inefficiency and potentially cause breakdowns and other things in the future. I think another key point is that through the FDD, you can focus your maintenance PPM issues in a far better way. A lot of BMS service contracts can be quite small. They're a small part of an overall FM budget in a lot of sites. So I think by having a system which really pinpoints the system itself, what condition it's in, where there's issues within it, when an engineer then turns up for a certain time, if they've got a day a week, 2 days a week, or a day a month, rather than coming in and starting just on a file that just runs sort of A to Z every time, you're much more focused on what you're actually coming to site to do. The other things will get picked up in time, but I think that's a good way of improving from someone who's been an engineer for years, going into a building blind. If you've got a report which basically says, here are a number of issues that, and again, like in a system Paul's got, if you can add a monetary value, financial cost to not doing those issues at the time, then I think that just gives an overall improvement to the service. You can review maintenance contracts in line with that as well. But I mean, overall, it's just really improving your efficiency, performance, downtime, stopping things happening before they fail, which again has an impact on tenants if it was a manufacturing facility or an industrial. If you can pick up faults before they happen, you're going to reduce downtime and issues to the client.
Great, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, some nice points there. So around efficiency, it's in terms of identifying the issues. And I think you made a nice point there about it's not just doing the right things faster, but also your second point, focus, not wasting time and money on things that aren't a priority and are maybe clouding time and providing less of a service for your clients and your owners. So some nice points there. And of course, there is the monetary aspect to it as well. So Ryan, on this first thing then, from your perspective, I could bring you in. So what are those benefits you see for partners, for those working closely with the property owners? What's the win for them, Ryan?
Yeah, for us, it really boils down to the services we provide, and better tools leads to better outcomes. That's kind of the basis of what we're trying to do in our world. Generally speaking, we are looking at our clientele across large portfolio or enterprise. Generally, when we come to that set of buildings, we've got various toolings, vintage of BMS or metering systems or whatever kind of IoT installation may have occurred over the course of the last 20 years. And the people that are working in these buildings are either specifically intelligent on one system or completely ignorant of. So these tools that can help us gather data, normalize data, and then enhance the interpretation of that data to make it more actionable enables us to be better at our job. We are literally a company like others that are selling manpower essentially to these facilities to keep them up and running and compliant and hit goals and collaborative. So we need to look at tools like this and utilize them properly to be better at what we're doing to deliver for our clients. So that's kind of the overarching benefit when we look at these types of technologies. The specifics of FDD are going to make our jobs easier in both the short term and the long term. If we can knock out these simple, irritation-based kind of anomalies in buildings, those are things that we don't have to deal with in the coming months or years of our contract. We know we've got something in place that is looking for those and alerting of those if they arise again, and we can go to normalize and facilitate remediation on those issues in a more meaningful and efficient manner. So that's where we win. We're enabling our teams to go in and do more with less, essentially. Less time, less manpower. Generally speaking, we're in a world where it's a bit of a race to the bottom of, can we provide this service, or are our competitors providing this service for a lower cost? So we need to go in and look at these types of technologies on how to enable our bottom lines, but be it for the betterment of our client output. And it's specifically helpful for all the businesses that we work with. They don't want to worry about these things. That's why they have providers like ourselves in these places. And it's up to us to kind of be the experts and bring the tooling to them, or use the tooling that they may have to the best of its ability to provide that service.
Excellent, thank you. So some nice points there. That's maximum start, better tools, better outcomes. But I like the point you made about it's one thing having the data, but then you got to make it more actionable in order to deliver a better service. And that's where you can create value potentially for those clients. And that's where you enhance the meaning and as you say, ultimately you can do more faster and more with less. And I see now we're beginning to get a few questions jumping in. So audience, if you've joined just after the start, you'll find the Q&A button at the bottom, so you don't need to wait until the end. Type them in as we go and we'll pick them up as we go along, hopefully. So thank you very much for that, Ryan. So now if we're coming into our second question, if you like, here. So we're going to delve into some case studies, really, some lessons from real world examples. So Daniel, I'm coming back to you. So thinking back over your career, I'm going to ask you, is there a standout example where FDD uncovered a persistent issue or delivered value, but in a way that surprised you or your client? Not the obvious one, where a bit of a discovery. Was there a surprising benefit case that you can think of, Daniel?
There's been a few, I suppose. One of the main ones, working on a project, and then came in afterwards to put in an FDD type system at the time. It's a few years ago, but basically the same setup. But there was quite a large commercial building. I think there was 4 air-cooled chillers on the roof at the time, which were providing cooling, and then there was a project to include some water-cooled. So it was quite a large project, cost wise. All went in, was commissioned, was set up, and they were running for probably 6 to 8 months. And then the system then was engaged and put over the site. And then by looking back through historical data and then starting to pick up alarms within the system, the chiller, one out of the 2 chillers, one was costing about $100,000 a year to run more than the one sitting next to it. And again, the software picked up the fact that there was numerous things that were sort of flagging it within the system, but the long and short of it was that the commissioning engineer had just ticked one box slightly different on the commissioning from one chiller to the other, which is something that you're very unlikely to ever see unless you've got something which is actually looking at what is your sort of schedule times, what is the BMS doing, what is the metering data doing, putting the two together, and then picking up the fact that you've actually got quite a drastic difference in running for same temperatures or same sort of loads, same days, but you're getting quite a drastic difference. So that, yeah, I mean, that was quite a good one to find. I've had a few others similarly where...
Oh, go on.
I was just going to say another one as well, similar, where a commercial building, which was very much operated 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. And at some point after a visit, the schedules had been overridden and the building ran 24/7, and it wasn't, again, picked up until a system was put in place. And then as much as there were other services and things going on, it just hadn't been picked up. But then the system picked up basically that everything was on 24/7. The building manager was only there 9 till 5, wasn't there weekends, didn't know anything was running. And I mean, that was, yeah, sort of a few $100,000 a year worth of additional energy costs. So picking up things like that is a good thing to do.
Those are two nice examples. There are nice surprises sometimes. I mean, the bad surprise is that you've been wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars unwittingly. The nice surprise is you found it and you're not going to keep doing that. So those are some nice examples. So Ryan, if I came to you, so is there a particular case you might mention where FDD directly influenced, strategy or operations or outcomes for a client? What might you cite as a good example?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe not to bring a downer on the subject, but we've had some failures with FDD, and those have been lessons learned, important ones to us that have greatly influenced our strategy.
Okay.
Early on, there's obviously costs to look at as you're looking at these things. There's a whole marketplace full of different toolings that include FDD specifically or inclusive of FDD. So there's a lot of noise in the ecosystem, we'll say. We've had clients that have brought to us technologies, good, bad, or indifferent, to be honest, on that front, but our adoption was a bit slow, and that really kind of, turned a light bulb on and changed many things on the platform that we are doing. But in this particular case, the client was interested in the technology. We, from a management level, said, of course, put it in the hands of our operators, and arguably it failed. The motivation to change wasn't there. The problems that were found were kind of brushed off as, yeah, we kind of know about those, or, we don't have the funding to look at those, or, we're trying to fix the problem, but there's no real follow-up in what that is. So a lot of those things, they're not automagical as we apply these technologies to situations. There is a certain level of deployment and follow through that is needed when we utilize these technologies. And that for us has been probably the greatest learning point and motivator to really dig our heels in and start looking at these things more aptly. The, possible loss, and we can go on, and I'm sure everybody on the call and probably in the audience can tell you a story of finding equipment running 24/7 or simultaneous heating and cooling and all kind of the low-hanging fruit, easy fix things. But it is done at some effort. These people that are finding these things, that are utilizing these tools, are the needed champions to make this work. And that was kind of a blind spot that we ran into, and looking back now, a happy accident, I would say.
Yeah, well, it's very important to get into the reality of making it work. And actually, we've had a question ping up for you, Ryan, then, if I keep you on the mic, as it were, because somebody in the audience has asked then interesting points. So how did you overcome some of those onboarding hurdles or pushbacks? What were your learnings that you might do differently, or how you might respond better if you encountered anything similar.
Yeah, candidly, it's been a challenge. There's been a lot of kind of, is it the stick or the carrot? We can obviously put leverage and force people to kind of say utilize these things. That generally does not work very good in the human domain of asking someone to or telling someone to change. So trying to influence change, trying to champion people into finding these problems, enabling them. One of the perspectives that we get a lot is folks running buildings are generally the go-to person. They get their attaboys, if you will, from being the problem fixer. So the perspective's a bit different when they're fixing the problem, perhaps proactively. You're not maybe getting that attention. So we're trying to find ways
Right, I see.
to
Yeah.
enable that kind of, awareness and congratulations up front. Building customized KPIs, or alternate KPIs, more or less off the traditional ones that we would typically use. Generally in our workforce, work orders closed is a big kind of service contract SLA number. Doesn't really mean a lot when we start looking at technology of getting in front of work orders or generating those work orders through an automated system and then closing them out internally. So you're not seeing that kind of public awareness of what's being done. So we've been trying to shine a light on a lot of that to get over some of those hurdles. And, a lot of it is also through conversation, through influencement and education, making people more aware of what they can do. And generally what we're seeing from an enterprise level is finding the champions and then putting them across broader spaces and working them up categorically in the hierarchy of kind of the business unit where, there is a strategy or a means to kind of succeed further in your career if you embrace these things and properly utilize them.
Those are some very nice points, actually, because the reality is, although obviously we're talking a lot about the tech and the kit, it's the soft skills sometimes, it's the people, it's the rapport building, it's the relationships, and as you sort of implied, if somebody likes to think they're known to be good in a crisis, if you stop those crises happening, sometimes you almost deny them the oxygen of applause. And that is how teams work sometimes, and you have to be alive to some of that internal dynamic in order to get the kind of buy-in and engagement you're looking for. So some nice points there. Thanks for picking up the extra question. So Paul, if I come to you now, so from CIM's recent body of work, I wonder if you could give me one quick sort of prime example of where FDD made a measurable impact. That's the word I'm looking for, please, Paul.
Yeah, so two quick examples, Jim. One is very much on the operational side, and it's, I suppose, maybe a small bit funny, but I thought it was a really good story because it kind of ticked a couple of boxes. But basically, we had a situation where the software identified that an outside air handling unit, an outside air unit, was essentially bringing in fresh air to supply a multiple air handling units downstream. And in order to fix an air starvation issue, a technician had gone up and they had basically overridden the VSD on the main outside air unit and ramped it fully up to 100%. So the software identified that had been changed, and the technician went up to change it. But when he did, he found that there was a pigeon had got stuck to the inside of the air intake grill, because essentially the volume of air now being pulled into the building, this poor pigeon had got trapped. So anyway, when the software identified it, there was an energy saving fix, and also that I suppose the local bird watching society are happier now that that's not a problem for flying birds by anymore. But that was kind of a light issue, but it was definitely a win for the building owner in terms of, I suppose, air quality and also energy savings. The second value I wanted to kind of touch on is, I suppose, back to the point that Ryan was making around how you enable people that are managing buildings, how you make their job easier, or how you bridge that gap between what's identified and realized, and making that entire process a small bit more efficient, if you like. So one example, I suppose, of how our partners have used FDD to streamline that whole process of doing energy audits, collating data, running analysis across that data. Before, it was a very labor-intensive process where an engineer would have to go out to the site, They'd have to sit in front of a BMS screen. They'd have to review multiple screens. They'd have to try and spot things that were incorrect. They might have to do a data dump onto a USB key. They have to bring that back to the office, do more analytics on it, then create a report and then email it to a facility manager. So you can imagine that's a very labor intensive and slow process.
Yeah.
So partners of ours have been able to move all that so that you have real-time analytics being performed on data, and you're able to inform people that can resolve it, being the operations team that Ryan mentioned, getting them to, empowering them to be able to act on stuff in real time. And that has been a fantastic short-circuiting, if you like, of time and effort. And it's also improved the adoption rates because, if there is an issue, back to the point you were raising earlier around the culture and connecting with teams and people, being, someone being able to put a flag up or a notification up to say, I'm after solving all these issues just today.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling for anyone that's running a building. So two kind of short value outcomes.
Two nice examples there, and very much real world. It might even involve a pigeon, so that's, you can't get much more real world than that. The environment. So now we're moving into the second half, if you like, and I always like, in a way, the middle section of these webinars, because after the intro and the outro, the middle is often where we really get into the issues and the challenges. And obviously, if it were easy and all was smooth, then we wouldn't need to have a webinar. In a sense, it's dealing with some of the wrinkles and managing to iron them out and recognize them, etc. So moving into then considerations when implementing FDD, which we know kind of means issues and challenges potentially. So Ryan, if I come to you first on this one. So when you're advising clients on selecting an FDD solution, so what would you see as the key criteria that separate a good provider, merely good, from a great one? What's those differentiators you would be looking for, Ryan?
Muted myself. This is a tough one. There's a lot of good solutions out there currently, and a lot of it, as we look at it, we compare it to what our kind of client profile is. So we're looking at the use case, specifically what the portfolio is, what are these owners, are these lessees, are they leasers? So we see all types, and that's where we start, is kind of evaluating the fit for the customer.
Yeah.
And then kind of go back to the technology. We have some kind of broad strokes we take to look at technology in general to make sure they kind of, are above board on the simple things. And then we get into, probably what's difficult to evaluate, how well can we get these things onboarded and active? What's the timeline of that? Is there a glide path that is clean and clear? Because the uptick or the utilization factor that we need in result of these products can be greatly impacted by that upfront effort. If it's a complete hassle getting through IT and cyber, which we all know where that can kind of lead to. But beyond that, if there's compatibility issues with the systems in place, we want to know that. If there's going to be timelines or hiccups or a lot of back and forth getting building detail, those types of things, all of those friction points add up to what we're trying to do is drive utilization in the end result of these products. So the faster, the more efficient, the more white glove it can be going in, the quicker that we can get our teams up and moving and bought into the data side. That's the other piece, is we need to instill some sort of, confidence in the product that they're using. So data issues, as soon as I see something that is obviously wrong or inherently wrong being presented, I've lost my team at that point and then have to regain them. So we're looking for things, iteration after iteration, it needs to be better and better and better. And there needs to be buy-in from the service provider, technology provider to instill that and have the same values that we have going into these exercises.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so some nice points I sort of took from what you said initially was also understanding your client properly, that the tech is a fit for them, as opposed to trying to work the other way around and come in with some assumptions and try and fit the client to the tech. And the idea also that, competence is often built on confidence, and once you lose that element of confidence, then it's ever so much harder to get the buy-in and the effort and the time you need from people. So Daniel, if I'm coming to you on this then, so from a technology perspective, what should firms be watching out for when they're evaluating FDD tools? What I'm really looking for, are there any clear red flags or green lights? What's the yes button? What's the no button on some of the things you're looking at, Daniel?
I think similar to what Ryan's just said, really, around what the building is, what's the complexity, what's the size of it, does the system fit what the type of building you got? Again, picking the right technology for the right building as well, and not just the client side of it. Is the how simple is it to get the system into the building? Will it talk to any BMS system, metering system? Can additional sources of information be brought in? So you might have a good BMS system, but there's not a lot of meter in place, but you've got automatic meters that the utility companies get. Can you then bring that data back in so you can then further analyze that sort of data? Again, there are lots of buildings now, especially commercially, have sort of their own heat mapping of how many people are in the building, sort of how frequently the building's used. Can you bring that data in as well? So not just looking for faults within the system or finding those faults, but also potentially improving the efficiencies that you've got by timing it, using your sort of enabling, scheduling, etc. I think, again, what is the user interface like? Is it good? Is it simple? Do you think users are going to be able to use it efficiently? Is there good support? And again, does it lend itself to bringing in the wider team, the contractors, the people who need to sort of get the information? Does it get them easily to them, rather than a system which, it might flag up lots of alarms, but does it then actually go anywhere without needing a lot of human interference or interface to be able to get that information out? So I think a good, clear system that's easy to implement, has all the engines to be able to talk to anything that's already built in, I think, and security as well. Obviously, this day and age, it's very much around if you're putting something in that's got an external connection to a BMS system, which have been issues of people getting into a building via the BMS. Again, how secure is that with the rest of the works that you're doing? So I think they're fairly good things to look out for.
Thanks. Yeah, some nice points there, and of course, crucial one with security. While I've just got you on the mic there, I'm just Ryan touched on some KPIs earlier, so he answered a bit of one of the questions for me, which was very kind of him. Thank you. So I'll just throw it to you, Daniel, while I've still got you. So we've had a question coming about what are the KPIs or the success metrics that you'd recommend partners track to prove the ROI of FDD? If they're skeptical, what would you point to for them to know that basically they're getting something for their money?
I just think if the system is working correctly and it's got a financial element to it, picking up what you've got a fault, there's a cost to doing it or not doing it. If it highlights that, again, you're within 6 months of a system being there. If you've captured X amount of faults and you can, through either energy sort of metering data, energy, and your financial bills, is there a difference on that? Looking at it up front, it's not quite so easy before you get it in, but I think a good system within a fairly short space of time should really be able to demonstrate that. And if you're looking at systems, then those are the questions that you want to ask.
Excellent. Really. Yeah, thanks. And I guess some of the kind of case studies, examples we touched on, they are replicable. What happened somewhere else and worked well for a client could also work well for them. So just before I ask you the question in this section, Paul, I wonder if I'm picking up one more audience question, because they're coming in thick and fast. And while we're on the money, when we're talking about the cash, I've had the question that almost always comes up in this kind of thing: what's the startup cost or average implementation cost to integrate this FDD for new and existing facilities? So in other words, how much does it cost, Paul? Somebody's asked. We can't ignore the question.
Sure. It does come up the whole time, Jim. Essentially, what certainly in our business we've tried to do is make the commercial model very transparent and very easy. So on a partner model, we charge on a per point basis. and an indicative price would be $1.50 per point per year, and it drops to $1 per point per year once you go above 50,000 points, which is typically about 10 buildings. So that's how much it costs, and that's it. There's no hidden cost. There's no cost for the devices included in that. There's no training cost. There's no hosting costs. You don't need to hire a software developer. Essentially, it's all baked into that price. And we offer white labeling as well, so the client's logo would appear when the partner's client logs in, they'd see it as their engine. So it's very simple and it's very fast, and there's no capex outlay needed to get up and going.
Excellent, thanks. I knew that would be that kind of answer, which no hidden costs, no surprise add-ons, nice and simple, which of course makes that uptake quicker and easier. So moving back from the money back then to this kind of implementation question, Paul, I've just got one for you on this. So, not all buildings or portfolios are equally ready to adopt FDD. It's not all the same. So at CIM, what practical factors do you consider when assessing the readiness, where they're starting from on the block, if you like?
Yeah, so I suppose for FDD to work, it needs, the building needs to be large and complex. So when I say large, it probably needs to be greater than 10,000 square meters or 100,000 square feet, because there's lots of data points typically available in those type of buildings. It's got to have a building management system or a building automation system, and ideally it also has to have central plants. So ideally big chillers, big boilers, big air handling units. Now you can do the smaller splits as well if they're captured on the BMS. And that's really it. Like, once a building is large, complex, has an ability to get the data from, so it doesn't have a proprietary protocol. So ideally, if the BIS has a backnet communication protocol, it just means that the collation and the access to the data is easy. The challenge you find is that some of the older building stock, I think Ryan, you mentioned it, that in the UK they call it, I think, the heritage sites, is it, Dan? Some of those sites have very limited data points. So from a software perspective, you can still get insights. It's just the software the quality of the alerts that it identifies is directly proportional to the quantum of data we can bring into the platform. So the older assets sometimes are not the best type of assets to deploy on.
Excellent, thanks. So if it's large and complex, that's a good thing. Although age and some of the restrictions that come with it, hey, we're all familiar with that, can potentially be an issue too. So we're moving into the last 10 or 15 minutes now. So panel, I warn you, things are going to get faster and it's fingers on buzzers a bit more now. So a quick look, we've picked up some questions. It's crystal ball time. We're looking ahead. So Daniel, I'm coming to you, and I'm asking what excites you. I'm asking you what excites you most about where FDD is headed over the next few years. Is it the tech? Is it the way clients start to use it, or something else? So what would you point to as this is the exciting prospect for us over the next few years, Daniel?
I think both, really, tech and the clients. I mean, from a client side, I think more people are sort of becoming engaged in this. There's obviously through carbon reporting, energy costs, utilities, etc. There's, I think, a greater buy-in from clients who want to use this sort of technology to help them with their buildings, help the site team improve services for tenants, etc. Improve response time. So their overall sort of KPIs looking after buildings improve, sort of as we spoke about earlier. I think, those getting efficiency improvements overall is just a great thing for them to get. And again, that puts money back in investments into improving the systems that are already there. Like Paul said, you might have a sort of an older site which can be connected to, but there's some legacy equipment that you'd like to upgrade, and then by implement a system which shows sort of clear savings on responding to issues and improving efficiency, can go back into improving the building overall. And I think just from a tech perspective, software, AI engines, the more rules that are being built from the more buildings that are sort of being adopted in by using this. And again, looking at the technology sort of help almost reshaping maintenance contracts or how things are done on a much more reactive basis. Potentially, you still need to do your general But I think just by the tech helps to keep improving that and sort of reactive maintenance, getting things before they fail. And again, I think with technology improving, you can bring more and more systems into it, so become part of BIM models, become part of other parts of the tech.
Nice point again about the preventative potential. And also, you've just about picked up one of the other questions I was going to throw out, actually, because we've got a question about, while you're there, Daniel, it says, for those of us supporting clients on their net zero or ESG journeys, so kind of the broader landscape, sustainability issues, how does FDD fit into that decarbonisation strategy? And in a sense, if I heard you correctly, you suggested that that is one of the exciting benefits, potentially, that it can directly help those strategies and those journeys which maybe teams are trying to tackle, if I understood you right, Daniel.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, yeah, you're with that side of it, the measure of improving the building and also making it more efficient, the day-to-day running of it, the more efficient you can get, the better savings you can get from running equipment, the more you can keep it running in an efficient manner, obviously has an impact on utility costs and carbon reporting going forward. So, and again, it allows you to look at how you can bring in other technologies outside of the standard building, be it solar, renewables, etc., how they can impact that building and further reduce your sort of carbon usage.
Yeah. Nice. So directly identifying savings, but also that integration piece. And often it's the sum of the parts, and that's where the real benefits are found for the sustainability teams or the decarbonisation
Sorry,
drive.
Jim, can I just add to that slightly, if you don't mind? What we're seeing is some clients, the fact that FDD is helping equipment extend equipment life cycle. That's immensely beneficial from a ESG perspective, because there's embodied carbon in a new chiller, right? And now the building owner has to take that scope 3 emissions, which can be quite punitive in terms of trying to offset them with PPA or whatever like that. So not only does the client get an extension in the capex deferral, but they now get avoided emissions, which is becoming equally as valuable for an ESG roadmap perspective.
That's a nice point about extending life cycles and durability issues. So Ryan, if I'm coming to you in terms of the crystal ball, I don't know if you're ready to suggest. So your conversations with clients as they look ahead, what are the most common capability gaps or future needs they're highlighting when it comes to digital solutions for their buildings? What are those things they're anticipating they're going to need to solve or plug going forward?
I think the most obvious roadblock is still probably technical compliance. You know, the first thing that we see from any kind of building owners or operators or you know, folks that are interested in this kind of thing at all is, here we have this building that's our worst performer. What can you do with it? And it's their worst performer because they haven't invested a dime into it over the last 30 years or whatever it might be. You've got antiquated systems, so there's upfront cost to get these things digitally ready, as we like to say, for technology. And you've got to do that first. I mean, generally speaking, you're not going to throw an FDD on a old vintage building automation system. It's certainly not going on pneumatics when you run into those still. But you know, in the means of talking to ESG or sustainability goals, you know, as of 2 days ago, we are closer to 2030 than we are to 2020 at this point. So these things are coming at us quick, and you need to be doing things even faster. We get into the conversations around ROI and investment costs in these technologies, but no one seems to really want to understand the cost avoidance that these things can prevent too. What are you spending right now that you don't even know about because you don't have the awareness, you don't have the vision, you don't have the transparency across these systems, and especially at scale? You know, it's one thing for one building, but when I'm talking about tens, 20s, hundreds of facilities without any kind of normalized compliance, you really don't know where you're at. Energy, comfort, IAQ, name your metric. That's what we're looking at and trying to bring forward. There's multiple ways to do that, but realistically, we know where the biggest data sets are in these facilities. They are in the BMS, regardless of what metric you want to look at. That's your best source of data. And if you're not normalizing across the enterprise, you're blind to what's happening in your wallet. And that's really where we start the conversation.
Good, strong point. And as you say, I think it's barely little more than 1,600 days to 2030. So if people have those net zero and decarb targets, there's some busy work to be done between now and then. So before we move to final takeaways, Paul, then if I come to you, so as AI continues to advance, making headlines and news every day, of course, how is CIM actually leveraging it to enhance your FDD platform? Are there any upcoming AI-driven capabilities that you say making a real difference for building performance? So separate the signal from the noise for us for a moment, please, Paul.
Yeah, I suppose just back to your point about 2030 being, coming down the tracks really quickly. What we've used AI for, and I touched on it in the slides at the start, is to be able to rapidly cleanse, normalize, and onboard data from buildings, and being able to do that across a client's portfolio in parallel. So that one example is we have a client that has 59 buildings with us, and we were able to integrate their entire portfolio in less than 7 weeks. So that's a super quick ramp time. So it means that the client can start getting energy reduction, CO2 reduction really, really quickly. And that, is very fast. And again, it's a good use of AI for that. The second piece then is around that rule tuning. Dan touched on it there. Like we're sitting on billions of data points across, thousands of air handling units, as an example, across different geographies. And AI is beginning to help us, and machine learning. We have a data science team that are beginning to try and detect ways to optimize our rules library that can fine-tune or be fine-tuned using AI over time to get them more honed and more accurate. Because I think Ryan, at the start you mentioned about retaining the trust of the people that are interacting with this platform. If you give them a false negative or a false positive, they just go, "Oh, this is rubbish." So we have to be super careful and super cognizant of that. So using AI to improve the accuracy of the FDD platform is always a key thing that we're conscious of. And then I suppose the last bit is that machine learning, like how we can use that quantum of data to better inform ESG's carbon reduction roadmaps. How to fine tune, how to replicate best practices across one client portfolio, anonymize it, and bring it across other portfolios to try and, as I said, from a benchmarking perspective, try and the analogy we use internally is like a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we can get it good for one client, why can't we do that across all clients? Using AI.
Yeah, nice point, and a good point about trust, hard won, easy lost. So we're coming to final takeaways then. And panel, I've been asking you to work hard. You'll see there's one question we've got remaining in the Q&A. It's a little question about the impact of FDD and neighbours designed for performance ratings. If you can offer an answer to that, could I invite you to type in the Q&A box while we're wrapping up, and then that would allow us just to pick that up. So you'll see that one question. If you've got something to offer there while we're concluding, if you type a few words, and then we've really covered the bases. So we are then moving now to these concluding takeaways, and I'm going to ask each of the panel here, while they're slightly distracted with that Q&A bit, what's your final takeaway? So I'm going to ask you, what's your one key piece of advice, one pithy, short, punchy piece of advice that you'd offer organizations looking to successfully adopt and embed FDD into their buildings to drive this performance improvement? So what's the one thing, your elevator pitch piece? Daniel, first with you. What's your one big piece of advice they should remember?
I think get the building accessible to FDD, really. If you've got, if you've got a BMS system, even old legacy systems, these days you can get generally a newer piece of kit, which will talk to it, which then gives you FDD accessibility to those points. And as Ryan said, there's always a large amount of data sitting within the BMS systems, which I think helps impact, and that will pay going forward, I believe.
Excellent, thanks. So you're leading with accessibility. Ryan, so what's your one big takeaway? If they remember nothing else from the 60 minutes, what's the one thing you want burning in their ears as they leave their screens, Ryan?
I would say a willingness to change and adopt what you're doing. We've been operating buildings the same way, arguably, for the last probably 30 years, we'll say, since DDC has been part of our world. And it is now changing. It is time to change and make better. on these things, and these are the tools that we need to do that. If you're not doing that, you're living in the past, and you're not going to go very far that way.
Excellent. Nice, strong points for you. So, of accessibility and change, willingness to change, crucially. And Paul, what's your one final takeaway, your parting shot for people, Paul?
Like my recommendation would be just to jump in, right? The barriers to entry are essentially gone now. Like, so not gone, but they're very much lowered. So there's no excuse really anymore. And that sounded bad, but the sector is educated on FDD and the impact it can have. Just jump in. Just jump in. And as I said, I think anyone who implements it and who embraces it and gets their operations team to support it, they will have a very positive experience.
Excellent. Nice point to finish on. So very positive and constructive, accessibility, willingness to change, and just jump in. So we are absolutely bang on time with the hour. So thanks for your questions as well. Concluding thoughts from me. All I'll say is, when it comes to, say, low carbon technologies, energy efficiency in real world scenarios, with clients, partners, property portfolios, it'd be great if perfection were the norm, if everything worked everywhere for everyone all the time. But guess what? Buildings are seldom that simple. Our jobs, honestly, are never that easy. So that's why fault detection and diagnostics matter, and that's where AI can help. In other words, sustainability, often the best you can do is to do better. So on that closing note, then, big thank you to our esteemed panelists for their insights, Ryan Droege, Daniel Stanley, plus, of course, Paul Walsh, our hosts at CIM, to yourselves, our virtual audience out there, for your questions, joining us at your desks and on your screens today. As mentioned, you will get sent the recording after this for you to look back and check out those early slides again and the details. Please don't forget to complete the very short post-event survey. It's super helpful for the organisers to understand what you most liked and what you'd like to see more of next time. Look forward to seeing you again next session in the series. Keep an eye on the CIM LinkedIn page and in your email box for details. Meantime, thanks again, panel. That's it for today. I've been Jim McClelland, editor at SUSMEME. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.